Meanwhile, the UK police are investigating the gang case of a 16-year-old in the Metaverse.
Now, this is a headline that honestly left me shocked and confused. Never in my years of living did I think the police would be involved in a crime that was committed on the Metaverse. But it led me to start asking questions. At what point do we draw the line between reality and virtual reality? Could there come a point where virtual reality becomes so advanced, so real, that one wouldn't be able to tell the difference between actual reality? And if so, if we ever do reach that point, what would be considered ethical or unethical? What would be considered a crime or not? It led me down a pretty fascinating rabbit hole. It started off with crimes committed in VR, but it became much darker. Addiction, mental illness, derealization were all common themes I found when researching cases involving virtual reality.
Ready, aim, attack!
Olivia, quick! Did you get the picture?
Yes, I got it.
That is it! You're under arrest!
Blindfold is a virtual reality experience created by indie gaming studio Ink Stories. Blindfold is a highly realistic simulation of interrogations that journalists working in conflict regions often undergo when detained. Ink Stories worked closely with the Center for Human Rights in Iran and the Committee to Protect Journalists to make the simulation this realistic, using techniques from documentary filmmaking and video game development, along with details and textures from real-life experiences of journalists and others who have been freed from Evin. When an interrogator grills you in Blindfold, you're commanded to nod your head yes or no. It feels like you're actually there, getting interrogated. The game offers a touch of realism of what some real-life journalists had to go through when working in conflict regions. More and more, ethicists and VR practitioners are asking whether the techniques that make a program like Blindfold so immersive and realistic could someday be used not just to depict psychological torture, but to inflict it. In 2016, scientific studies about body transfer illusion and vicarious pain, a phenomena that causes us to perceive that we're feeling another body's sensation, including its physical suffering, discovered that VR held the potential to induce severe pain or suffering, whether physically or mentally. Virtual reality has the potential to blur the line of what is legal and what is not. It's called hacking sensory motor perceptions. Are humans limited to the senses we're born with, or is it possible to hack the brain and create new senses? Could VR come to a point so advanced that even though physically nothing is happening to you, but your brain is tricked into something is? The potential for harm raises questions that many casual VR users haven't even begun to confront about who will regulate and drive the technology going forward, and who, governments, developers, investors, consumers, will be responsible for setting ethical boundaries.
As per reports, the victim was wearing a virtual reality headset in an immersive game when her avatar, an animated representation of her, was ganged by several male avatars.
British police investigated a case of virtual sexual assault earlier this year. The girl, under the age of 16, is said to have been left distraught after her avatar, her digital character, was ganged by the online strangers. Obviously, no physical injuries were reported, but officers claimed she suffered the same psychological and emotional trauma as someone who has been assaulted in the real world, as the VR experience is designed to be completely immersive. One officer quotes, "There is an emotional and psychological impact on the victim that is longer term than any physical injuries." Cases like these really start to blur the lines of the legal system. On the one hand, a girl has just gone through emotional and psychological damage that will probably stick with her for many years, but on the other hand, no crime was technically committed. Physically, nothing happened to her, but the offender was also able to act out their twisted fantasies without breaking any law. The metaverse creates a gateway for predators to commit horrific crimes against children, crimes we know have lifelong impacts both emotionally and mentally. This also isn't the first reported case of sexual assault in the metaverse. During the beta testing of Meta Horizon Worlds in November 2021, a user was virtually groped. In December 2021, a metaverse researcher's avatar was virtually raped by a group of male avatars who also harassed and photographed her. Another instance in May 2022 involved a Some of Us researcher who was virtually raped in a private room by a user during a party observed by others. Now, many of you might think cases like this are harmless. After all, just take off the headset. but it delves into a more deeper perspective. VR is supposed to create an immersive experience. It's supposed to blur the lines between what is real and what is not. What if we reach a point where we can no longer read between those lines, where we can't tell the difference? Would these crimes still be considered harmless? Just imagine, you take off your VR headset and you start to look around, but nothing quite feels real. You feel as if you're still in VR. Your movement, your vision, it all still feels like you're still an avatar, and things around you are still VR objects. 20 minutes goes by and the feeling starts to pass. You start to calm down, but part of you never wants to touch that VR headset ever again, because part of you thinks that if you go back, you might be stuck in that state forever. Now you may think this sounds harmless, but it's been happening to thousands of people over the past few years, and it's only getting worse. The phenomenon is called derealization, and it's a common side effect of using VR for too long. As virtual reality becomes more and more advanced, it is likely that derealization would occur more often and more powerful for users, possibly even permanent. Now, don't worry, that's just speculation. Nothing I said actually has any proof behind it, but it leads you to question, could there ever be a point when the derealization becomes so constant that it takes a permanent effect? Is virtual reality making us lose touch with reality? Humans are already addicted to their mobile phones, getting a boost of dopamine every time they swipe, resulting in countless hours of scrolling and less social activity. Now, virtual reality has the potential to be even worse. We must seriously start to consider not only the ethical implications of VR, but the psychological effects that it could have on us, because at some point, virtual reality might become indistinguishable to our actual reality.